Few people realize the importance of Lake Union in the world of rowing. One of the finest builders of racing shells the world has ever known, George Pocock, had his shop on Lake Union. And his boats were known and respected all over the world. Rowers from Seattle, from the university, and those who come here to row in clubs have made a reputation for themselves and for this country out of the experience of rowing, learning how to row on Lake Union. Rowing as a sport began in England when the river ferrymen became competitive for the simple reason that the man who could move the fastest probably picked up the most fares, and along with competition came a refinement of the boats, and they became finer and longer and faster. Oxford and Cambridge became probably the first of the colleges to take up rowing. The idea was that a healthy, vigorous boy could learn better than a boy who did nothing vigorous and strenuous. Rowing found its place in the United States for somewhat similar reasons. The University of Washington rowing program began formally in 1903. Hiram Conybeare's name has been associated with Washington rowing from the very beginning. It was he who brought the sport to the university, although in fact he himself was no oarsman. He eventually decided that he's going to have to get some boats built, and he heard about some local builders in Canada, George and Richard Pocock, so he decided to go up there and interview them. So he first appears on his way across Cole Harbor to the floating boat shed that the Pococks had set up, and they caught sight of this fellow floundering around in a rowboat, making his way in a very erratic course to their shop. They helped him aboard and were a little surprised to learn that he was a rowing coach. I think they tried very hard not to laugh because it was manifestly absurd that a man who couldn't manage a rowboat any better than that could coach rowing. And then he made them a deal that was irresistible, that they should come down and open a shop near the University of Washington. He could promise them orders for more boats. And in due course they came down and then found out that in fact he had no money, so they found themselves in Seattle with a shop set up in a tea room left over from the Seattle Yukon Exposition, a ramshackle building. It was only built to last for a matter of months rather than for years. The Pococks had unique talents as boat builders. They'd both come from the Thames. They had built boats from boyhood and knew the craft, which they learned from their father. And so they were well established as boat builders before they left England. But they developed a type of boat on Lake Union that was superb in its engineering and also built of the finest boat building wood that George Pocock had ever seen, which is the Western Red Cedar. The consequence of it was that he could build boats that would hold their shape and probably were an improvement on any boats that had been built previously. Eventually they had quite a market for their boats from colleges all around the country. George loved the work he did, and he loved the wood that he worked with. George used to say, wood, the perfect plastic, because he could make wood do anything he wanted it to. And I never saw him in a shop without his hand on a boat. His hand was always caressing the wood. It was as if he were finishing it with sandpaper so fine that you could hardly detect it. The association between the Pococks and the University of Washington continued because the coaches and oarsmen found them very, very helpful in learning the nuances of the sport. Both George and his brother Richard had been champions in professional races in England. So their hand was evident both in the building of the boats and the rowing of the boats. 1936, Washington sent a crew to the Olympiad in Berlin and won a gold medal. Olympic champions in 36, in 64 and 68, many world championships produced by men trained by George's son. Over the years, this water has certainly established itself in many people's minds as the place to come to get good rowing water and to get good rowing coaching.
Put your right heel down, all your power to your quad.
When I look across the lake, I remember what it was like when I first came here some 60 years ago. I saw no racing shells to speak of. And now I laugh when I think, where do all these people come from? We have 3 boat clubs on the shores of Lake Union, and on any day you'll see racing shows of every description, and the activity is constant. It's an exciting, busy, happy place to be. People who row find it rewarding in lots of ways that you might not suspect. I'm convinced that most of the rowers that I know feel there's a spiritual element in it. There are people who are enjoying a moment of inner tranquility and peace of mind that comes perhaps from no other activity that I can think of. When I look out there in the water, I see a whole society of people who've discovered something particularly wonderful and important, something that they will do the rest of their lives. If they begin as teenagers or if they begin as 50-year-olds, it's the same experience for everybody.